The hotel clerk's face had gone pale, her fingers trembling over the keyboard as she looked up at Zara Fleming with genuine terror in her eyes, and Zara knew immediately that something had gone catastrophically wrong. "I'm so sorry, Miss Fleming," the clerk whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm raging outside the centuries-old hotel. "There's been a terrible mistake. We've double-booked the Crimson Suite. It's our only available room tonight, and I'm afraid the other guest has already claimed it." Zara set down her rain-soaked duffel bag and tried to summon patience she didn't feel. She'd been traveling for 16 hours straight, her flight delayed twice by the freak thunderstorm that had descended on this remote corner of Romania. The anthropology conference she was supposed to attend had been her opportunity to finally present her research on ancient blood rituals, and now she was stranded in a hotel that apparently couldn't manage basic reservations. "Then call another hotel," Zara said, pushing her wet dark hair back from her face. "There must be somewhere else in town." The clerk's expression suggested this was akin to asking for the moon. "Miss Fleming, this is the only hotel within 50 miles that accepts foreigners. The storm has made the roads impassable. And the other guest," she paused, swallowing hard, "he's not someone we can simply relocate." Before Zara could demand an explanation, the air in the lobby changed. It was subtle at first, like the pressure drop before lightning strikes, and then she felt it fully a presence that made every instinct in her body scream danger. She turned slowly. The man descending the grand staircase was the most striking person Zara had ever seen. His hair was pure white, falling in elegant waves past his shoulders, contrasting sharply with skin so pale it seemed to glow in the dim hotel lighting. He wore a black coat that looked like it cost more than her entire research grant, and he moved with a predatory grace that made her breath catch. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. They were silver, bright as moonlight, and ancient beyond measure. "This is the human who dares contest my claim?" His voice was silk and steel, accented with something older than any modern language. He looked at Zara with the casual interest of a lion observing a sparrow. The clerk practically prostrated herself. "Lord Draven, please forgive the intrusion. There was an error in our booking system. Miss Fleming had a confirmed reservation, and we didn't realize. I care nothing for your incompetence." He descended the final steps, and Zara noticed that despite his intimidating presence, he kept a careful distance from the windows where lightning occasionally illuminated the night. "The suite is mine. Find the human alternative accommodation." Something about his dismissive tone ignited Zara's temper. She'd spent too many years being overlooked, dismissed, and talked over by men who thought their authority was absolute. She stepped forward, meeting those silver eyes with her own stubborn brown ones. "I have a confirmed reservation and I've been traveling all day," she said firmly. "I paid for that room in advance. If anyone should be relocated, it's you." The lobby went absolutely silent. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. Lord Draven tilted his head, studying her with new interest. Up close, she could see the sharp angles of his face, the aristocratic features that belonged on ancient statues. His eyes narrowed slightly, and she noticed his canines were unusually prominent when he spoke. "You have courage, little scholar. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless." He moved closer, and despite her bravado, Zara's heart began to race. "Do you know who I am? Someone who thinks his importance excuses bad manners?" The words were out before she could stop them. A ghost of something surprise, amusement, flickered across his perfect features. The clerk made a small sound of distress. "Lord Draven is the vampire king of the Eastern Territories," she hissed at Zara. "He owns this hotel. He owns half the country. He could—" "Vampire king," Zara repeated, then laughed despite herself. "Is that some kind of local aristocratic title? Because I hate to break it to you, but monarchies are mostly ceremonial these days, and that doesn't give you the right to—" She stopped mid-sentence because Lord Draven had moved with impossible speed, closing the distance between them in the space of a blink. He stood inches away now, tall enough that she had to crane her neck to meet his eyes. This close, she could see that his skin truly was unnaturally pale, translucent almost, with delicate veins visible at his temples. And those eyes, they reflected the light like an animal's. "I am Draven Noctis Alvaris, first son of the ancient blood, ruler of the northern courts, and I have walked this earth for 8 centuries. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it resonated through her entire body. "And you, brave little human, have just insulted me twice in as many minutes." Zara's rational mind screamed at her to apologize, to back down, to run. But something else, some deeper instinct she didn't understand, kept her rooted in place. She could feel the cold radiating from him, smell something like winter nights and old stone. "Vampires aren't real," she said, but her voice shook slightly. His smile revealed those pronounced canines, fully far too long to be natural, sharp as knives. "No? Then I must be a remarkable fever dream." "Lord Draven," the clerk interrupted desperately, "perhaps we could arrange for Miss Fleming to stay in the servants' quarters, or—" "No." The word was absolute. He turned that silver gaze back to Zara, and his expression shifted to something almost contemplative. "The human has a valid claim. She reserved the suite in good faith. It would be unchivalrous to simply cast her into the storm." Zara blinked, surprised. "So you'll find another room?" "No, the suite has accommodation sufficient for 2 occupants. You will take the bed. I will make other arrangements within the rooms." He said it as though this settled everything. "You can't be serious. Share a room? With you? Would you prefer I drain the lifeblood from your throat and solve the dispute permanently?" He said it so casually that it took a moment for the words to register. "Those are your options, little scholar. Share the suite or brave the storm. Choose quickly. My patience is not infinite." The clerk's face suggested that sharing a suite with a vampire, if he truly was one, was only marginally safer than the storm. But Zara looked at the windows, saw the trees bending nearly horizontal in the wind, heard the thunder that shook the building's foundations. She thought of her presentation tomorrow, her research that she'd worked so hard to complete, all the reasons she couldn't afford to fail. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth, "but I want it on record that this is highly inappropriate, and if you try anything—" "If I wanted to harm you, child, you would already be dead." He gestured toward the stairs with one pale, long-fingered hand. "After you. And do try not to touch anything valuable. The suite contains artifacts older than your country." Zara grabbed her duffel bag and marched toward the stairs, very aware of him following behind her. His footsteps made no sound at all. The Crimson Suite occupied the entire top floor of the hotel, accessible only by a private elevator and a winding staircase. By the time Zara reached the heavy double doors, she was breathing hard from the climb. Draven barely seemed to notice the exertion, moving behind her like a pale shadow. He reached past her to open the doors, and his sleeve brushed her arm. The cold was shocking, like touching ice. The suite was breathtaking. Gothic arches framed massive windows currently being pounded by rain. Antique furniture that looked genuinely ancient filled the space. A huge canopied bed dominated one corner, draped in deep crimson velvet. Tapestries hung on the walls depicting medieval scenes, and shelves held leather-bound books and strange artifacts she couldn't identify. Candles burned despite the modern electrical lighting, casting flickering shadows. "The bedroom is through there," Draven said, pointing to an archway. "You will have privacy. I require the main chamber for my own needs." Zara looked around, trying to orient herself. What needs, exactly? "None of your concern." He was already moving away from the windows, she noticed. The storm had intensified, and occasional flashes of lightning made him flinch almost imperceptibly. "I must rest before dawn. I suggest you do the same. It's barely 8 o'clock. I operate on a different schedule than humans." He moved to a large trunk in the corner, opening it to reveal what looked like rich fabrics and personal belongings. "You'll find the bedroom well appointed. There's a lock on the door if it makes you feel safer, though I assure you it would do nothing to stop me." "That's not reassuring." He glanced at her, and for a moment, something almost like humor flickered in those ancient eyes. It wasn't meant to be reassuring. It was meant to be honest. "I have no interest in harming you, Miss Fleming. You're of no value to me as prey. Too stubborn, probably. You'd give me indigestion." Despite everything, Zara felt her lips twitch toward a smile. Did the Vampire King just make a joke? "I've been told I had something resembling a sense of humor once, approximately 400 years ago." He turned his back to her, effectively dismissing her presence. "Go. Sleep. Try not to do anything foolish like attempting to stake me in my rest. I've had quite enough excitement for one evening." Zara grabbed her bag and retreated to the bedroom, closing and locking the door behind her. Then she sat on the edge of the massive bed and tried to process what had just happened. Vampires couldn't be real. They were mythology, folklore, stories created to explain disease and death before modern science. Her entire academic career was built on studying how ancient cultures created supernatural narratives to cope with their reality. But that cold, those eyes, the way he moved. She pulled out her laptop, grateful the hotel had Wi-Fi, and started searching. What she found made her blood run cold. Drive in Noctis. Alvarez wasn't just a legend. He was the legend. References to him appeared in texts dating back centuries, a vampire lord who ruled the Eastern European territories, known for his strategic brilliance, his absolute authority, and his dangerous temper. There were woodcuts showing a pale figure with white hair standing over battlefields. There were accounts from the 1600s describing a nobleman who never aged, never appeared in daylight, and whose enemies mysteriously died in the night. And there were recent photos, grainy, distant shots of a pale man attending various functions, always at night. The face was unmistakable. Zara set down her laptop with shaking hands. Either she was having an incredibly vivid hallucination brought on by exhaustion, or vampires were real and she was sharing a suite with their king. She should have been terrified. Any rational person would have been. But instead, as she lay back on the bed and stared at the canopy above her, she felt something else entirely. Curiosity. The anthropologist in her was already forming questions, seeing the research potential, understanding that everything she thought she knew about human history might need revision. And underneath that professional interest was something more primal, more confusing. The memory of silver eyes meeting hers, the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in her life, even if that gaze belonged to something that probably wanted to kill her. The storm raged on outside, and somewhere in the other room, a vampire king made his mysterious preparations for sleep. Zara closed her eyes and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. She must have dozed off despite her racing thoughts, because when she jolted awake, the room was completely dark. The storm had passed, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Her phone said it was 3 a.m. A sound from the main chamber made her freeze. Movement, footsteps, then voices, multiple voices, none of them friendly. "Lord Draven, you've been summoned before the council. They're displeased with your recent independence." Zara crept to the door, pressing her ear against it. She knew eavesdropping was dangerous, but the tension in those voices made her instincts scream warning. "I answer to no one." Draven's voice was colder than she'd heard it earlier, sharp as broken glass. "Tell Constantine I rejected his summons last century, and I'll reject them until the stars die. Get out of my chambers. The council anticipated your refusal. We're authorized to bring you by force if necessary." The sound that followed made Zara's blood freeze. It was bestial, inhuman, a snarl that spoke of predators and death. Then came the sounds of fighting, bodies hitting walls, something breaking, voices crying out. She unlocked her door without thinking, pulling it open. The scene before her was chaos. 3 figures in dark clothes were attacking Draven, and they moved like he did, with impossible speed and grace. But they seemed younger somehow, less powerful. Draven fought them off with brutal efficiency, his white hair flying as he moved too fast for her eyes to track properly. One of the attackers noticed her and changed trajectory instantly. He moved toward her with a smile that showed elongated fangs, and Zara understood with perfect clarity that she was about to die. But Draven was faster. He materialized between her and the attacker, moving so quickly she felt the wind of his passage. He caught the other vampire by the throat and slammed him into the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. "Touch her," Draven said, his voice resonating with power that made the windows rattle, "and I will end your entire bloodline, down to the last spawn." The other vampire choked out something that might have been an apology. Draven threw him toward his companions with enough force to send all 3 sprawling. "Leave, now! Tell Constantine that the next assassins he sends will be returned in pieces." The 3 vampires fled, moving so fast they seemed to simply disappear. Then there was silence, except for Zara's ragged breathing. Draven turned to face her, and she gasped. His eyes were no longer silver, they glowed red, bright as embers, and his fangs were fully extended. He looked absolutely inhuman, terrifying, lethal. He also looked magnificent. "I told you to stay in the bedroom," he said, and his voice still held that resonating power. "They were attacking you. I thought that you could help." The red in his eyes began to fade back to silver. "You would have died in seconds, little scholar. What possessed you to open that door?" Stupidity? She was shaking now, the adrenaline catching up to her. An overactive protective instinct? Terminal curiosity? He stared at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. The inhuman quality faded, leaving him looking almost concerned. You're in shock. Sit down before you fall. He guided her to one of the antique chairs, his cold hands surprisingly gentle on her shoulders. Breathe, slowly. You're hyperventilating. Zara tried to follow his instructions, focusing on her breathing. Who were they? What did they want? Enforcers from the Vampire Council. There's been a power struggle in our world for decades. Some of the older vampires believe I've become too independent, too willing to disregard the traditional hierarchies. He moved away, pacing the room with predatory grace. They want to bring me to heel, make an example of me. Because you don't follow their rules? Because I question whether those rules still serve us. The world has changed, Miss Fleming. Humans have changed, but the Council clings to ancient ways, ancient feuds, ancient hungers. They would see us continue living as parasites and predators, hiding in the dark while humanity advances beyond us. He paused by the window, by the Uter, looking out at the night. I believe we must adapt or die. For that heresy, they would destroy me. Zara's academic mind was already processing this information, filing it away, understanding the anthropological implications. A culture in transition. Old guard versus reformists, the classic pattern of social evolution. But her human heart was stuck on something simpler. You protected me. That vampire would have killed me, and you stopped him. Of course I stopped him. You're under my protection now. The moment you entered this suite, you became my responsibility. He said it like it was obvious, like there had been no other option. Ancient law. Any being who shares a vampire's dwelling is owed sanctuary and defense. It's one of the oldest codes we have. Even humans? Especially humans. They're so fragile, so easily broken. He turned to look at her, and his expression was unreadable. You should return to your room. Lock the door. I'll ward the suite against further intrusion, but dawn is coming and I must rest soon. Zara stood on shaky legs. Thank you for saving my life. Thank me by surviving until sunrise. And Miss Fleming. He waited until she met his eyes. If I ever tell you to stay somewhere safe, do it. Your curiosity will get you killed. She wanted to argue, but the memory of those attackers was too fresh. She nodded and returned to the bedroom, locking the door behind her. But sleep didn't come. She lay awake until dawn. Light started creeping through the windows, thinking about vampire politics and ancient codes of honor, and the way Draven had positioned himself between her and danger without a moment's hesitation. When she finally emerged around 9 in the morning, the suite was silent. The damage from the fight had been cleaned up, and Draven was nowhere to be seen. But there was a note on the table, written in elegant script that looked genuinely antique. Miss Fleming, I must rest during daylight hours. Take care not to disturb the curtains in the back chamber. I've arranged for breakfast to be sent up. The conference you mentioned begins at noon. You should attend. Knowledge is precious, even for stubborn humans who can't follow simple instructions. D. Despite everything, Zara found herself smiling at the note. She showered, changed into professional clothes, and was just finishing the elaborate breakfast that had been delivered when her phone rang. Zara Fleming? This is Dr. Petros from the conference. I'm afraid I have bad news. The venue has been compromised by storm damage. We're canceling today's sessions. Zara's heart sank. What about tomorrow? My presentation is scheduled for. The entire conference has been canceled. I'm so sorry. We'll try to reschedule for next quarter. She ended the call feeling numb. 3 years of research, months of preparation, the last of her grant money spent on this trip, all for nothing. She spent the day exploring the small town, trying to distract herself from disappointment. The locals gave her strange looks, and she noticed people seemed to avoid the hotel. When she asked a shopkeeper about it, the old woman's eyes widened. You're staying there? With him? Lord Draven? Yes, we're sharing a suite. By accident? She added quickly, seeing the woman's expression. Be careful, miss. He's not like the others. The vampires of this region, they keep to old bargains, old rules. They leave us mostly alone if we don't trouble them. But Lord Draven, he's ancient, powerful, unpredictable, and there are those who want him dead. The council. The shopkeeper looked shocked that Zara knew the name. They say there will be war soon, vampire war. When immortals fight, Humans die. It's always been that way. She pressed a small charm into Zara's hand, a carved wooden symbol. Protection. Old magic. It may not work against the undead, but it can't hurt. Zara returned to the hotel as the sun was setting, her mind churning. The clerk from last night was gone, replaced by a thin man who averted his eyes when she passed. The hotel felt different in twilight, more awake somehow, more aware. She climbed to the Crimson Suite and found Draven already awake, standing by the window and watching the last rays of sunlight fade. He wore different clothes, now a dark shirt that looked like silk, leather pants that were probably older than her grandmother. His white hair was loose around his shoulders. He looked like something from a painting, beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. "Your conference was canceled," he said without turning around. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" "I have resources, and I may have made certain inquiries." He glanced at her briefly. "You traveled far for this opportunity. It seemed unjust for it to be taken by mere weather. You looked into my schedule. That's kind of invasive, don't you think?" "I protect what's mine, Miss Fleming. And like it or not, until you leave this suite, you fall under that category." He turned to face her fully. "The council knows you're here. They'll assume you have value to me now. That makes you a target. I'm nothing to you. We just met yesterday. Vampires don't think in terms of time the way humans do. A day, a year, a decade, it's all the same. What matters is the connection, the claim, the bond." He moved closer, and Zara fought the urge to step back. "I've lived 800 years, and I've never met a human who looked at me with curiosity instead of fear, who argued with me instead of cowering, who opened a door to help me despite knowing what I am. I opened the door stupidly. You said so yourself. Stupidly. Bravely. Perhaps they're the same thing." His silver eyes searched her face. "You're in danger now because of me. I can't undo that, but I can ensure you survive it." "By what? Keeping me prisoner in this suite?" "By teaching you how to survive in my world, at least until the immediate threat passes and I can arrange safe transport back to wherever you call home." He said it seriously, no trace of humor in his expression. "The council will move against me soon. When they do, anyone associated with me will be caught in the crossfire. You need to know how to recognize vampire hunters, how to identify safe houses, how to call for help if you need it." Zara wanted to argue that this was insane, that she should just leave immediately. But she thought of the vampires from last night, of their casual confidence that they could kill her without consequence. She thought of the shopkeeper's warning about war. "Okay," she said, "teach me." They spent the next several hours in the strangest crash course of Zara's life. Draven explained vampire society with the clinical precision of someone who'd helped build it, the hierarchies, the ancient families, the territorial divisions that had existed since before recorded history. He taught her to recognize the signs of vampire presence, the unusual cold, the way shadows seem darker around them, the feeling of being watched by something old and hungry. "Most vampires aren't like the ones who attacked last night," he explained. "They're younger, weaker. Many are barely more powerful than humans, especially during daylight hours. But the old ones, the council members, were different, more dangerous, harder to kill." "How old is old?" "I'm considered relatively young at 8 centuries. The council's leader, Constantine, has walked the earth for over 2,000 years. He remembers the Roman Empire in its glory. He remembers when Christianity was a cult and vampires were worshipped as dark gods." Zara's anthropologist brain was in overdrive. This is incredible. The historical implications alone would get you killed if you tried to publish them. But he said it gently, almost regretfully. "Our existence remains secret because we enforce that secrecy ruthlessly. Humans who know too much tend to disappear." "Then why are you telling me all this?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because you deserve to understand the danger I've put you in. And because—" He trailed off, looking uncertain for the first time since she'd met him. "I find I enjoy speaking with you, Miss Fleming. You listen like a scholar, question like a skeptic, and argue like a warrior. It's refreshing." "Call me Zara," she said impulsively. "If I'm going to get dragged into vampire politics and learn how to survive your world, you might as well use my first name." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, pleasure, something warmer than she expected. "Zara, it suits you. Strong but soft, unusual." "My parents were hippies who really loved unique baby names. I used to hate it. Used to. It's growing on me." She met his gaze and felt that strange pull again, that sense of connection she couldn't explain. "What should I call you?" "Lord Draven seems formal for someone who's seen me in my pajamas." His lips curved in what might have been a smile. "My friends called me Dre once, long ago." "What happened to them?" "They died. Humans age, Zara. They wither and die while we continue on unchanging. It's why most vampires avoid forming attachments to your kind." He said it matter-of-factly, but she heard the old pain underneath. Everything you love becomes dust eventually. It's easier not to love at all. That sounds lonely. It is. But loneliness is better than grief. Zara wanted to argue, but she saw the truth in his ancient eyes. 800 years of watching everyone he cared about die. 800 years of isolation broken only by political maneuvering and power struggles. No wonder he seemed so distant, so controlled. They talked late into the night, and Zara found herself sharing things she rarely told anyone, her struggles in academia, her determination to prove her research had value, her complicated relationship with her still hippie parents who couldn't understand why she'd chosen such a corporate field of study. Draven listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested, not just being polite. And in turn, he shared fragments of his own history, glimpses of medieval battles, of plague years, of watching human civilization evolve from horseback to spacecraft. "Do you miss it?" Zara asked. "Being human?" "I barely remember being human. I was turned when I was 32, in the year 1224. I was a minor nobleman who made the mistake of impressing the wrong vampire with my swordwork." He looked down at his pale hands. "She turned me thinking I'd make a useful soldier. Instead, I ended up leading the rebellion that overthrew her dynasty. I've been politically inconvenient ever since. A rebel vampire king. That's kind of perfect." "Is it?" He looked at her with those unsettling silver eyes. "I've spent centuries fighting wars I didn't start, enforcing laws I don't believe in, playing political games that bore me. There's nothing perfect about this existence, Zara. We're predators wearing the faces of the dead. We survive by consuming life. There's no romance in it, no matter what your human fiction suggests." "Then why keep fighting? Why not just give up?" "Because despite everything, the world still surprises me sometimes, like stubborn anthropologists who argue with vampire kings and somehow survive." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "You're quite the anomaly, Zara Fleming." "I could say the same about you, Dre." He went very still when she used the nickname, and something intense flashed across his face. Then he stood abruptly, moving toward the window. "Dawn approaches. You should rest. Tomorrow we'll need to address the council situation more directly." Zara recognized a dismissal when she heard one, but she also heard the tension in his voice. She'd touched something, gotten too close, and now he was retreating behind his walls. She went to her room but didn't sleep, instead spending the pre-dawn hours researching vampire politics on her laptop. What she found was terrifying. The council Draven had mentioned was documented in dozens of conspiracy forums and occult websites, references to a secret society of ancient vampires who controlled vast wealth and influence. Most of it was dismissed as fantasy, but now Zara knew better. And according to these sources, the council didn't tolerate rebellion. Vampires who defied them tended to die in spectacular and public ways, their deaths serving as warnings to others. Draven was in real danger, and by association, so was she. When she emerged from her room around midday, she found a surprise. The main chamber had been transformed. A table was set with elaborate food far more than the simple breakfast from yesterday. And sitting beside her place setting was a leather-bound book that looked ancient. She picked it up carefully. The title was in Latin, but she could translate Codex Noctis, the Night Laws. A note fell from between the pages. "Zara, if you're to survive in our world, you need to understand our laws. This text contains the fundamental rules that govern vampire society. I've marked the relevant sections. Study it. Your presentation may have been canceled, but I suspect you're enough of a scholar to appreciate primary source material." D. Zara sat down and began reading, and her hands started shaking halfway through the first page. This wasn't just some historical text. It was the founding document of vampire civilization, written in blood and magic over 1,000 years ago. The anthropological value alone was incalculable. She spent hours absorbed in translation, documenting everything. The laws were brutal, but logical hierarchies based on age and power, strict rules about territory and feeding, elaborate protocols for disputes and succession. And woven through it all were references to older traditions, to the time before humans dominated the world, when vampires had been dark gods ruling openly over mortal populations. One section made her pause. It detailed the concept of sanctuary bonds the law Draven had invoked when he'd protected her. According to the text, any vampire who offered their dwelling to another being was bound by ancient magic to protect that guest unto death. It was considered one of the most sacred laws, superseding even council authority, which meant Draven was risking everything to keep her safe. She was so absorbed in reading that she didn't notice the sun setting until Draven emerged from the back chamber. He looked more rested than before, and his silver eyes went immediately to the book in her hands. "You're actually reading it. I thought you might be too disturbed by the content." "Are you kidding? This is the most significant anthropological find of the century. The historical insights alone." She stopped, seeing his expression. "You knew I'd react this way. You gave me this to distract me from worrying." "Guilty. You strike me as someone who processes fear through knowledge. I thought the codex might help." He moved to the window, checking the street below with practiced wariness. "Did you reach the section on blood bonds?" "Not yet. Why?" "Because the council will likely invoke them when they come for me. It's a traditional challenge trial by blood. Winner takes all. If I lose, they'll execute me and anyone under my protection." Zara's blood went cold. "You mean me?" "I mean you, which is why I won't lose." He said it with such absolute confidence that she almost believed him. "But if something does go wrong, there are contingencies. I've arranged for a car to take you to the coast, where a ship waits to take you anywhere in the world you want to go. You'll have money, documents, everything you need to disappear. I'm not running away and letting you die. You're human, Zara. You have no choice in this fight." "Then give me one." The words came out before she'd fully thought them through, but once spoken, she didn't want to take them back. The codex mentioned something about human familiars, people bonded to vampires who gain protection and power. "Could you do that for me?" Draven's expression went completely blank. "No." "Why not?" "According to your own laws, because a familiar bond requires blood exchange. My blood in your veins, your blood in mine. It would tie you to me permanently, change your physiology, extend your lifespan to match your vampire's age. You would become part of my world irrevocably." His voice was sharp, almost angry. "I won't condemn you to that." "Shouldn't that be my choice?" "Not when you don't understand the full implications. Familiars are rare, Zara. Most vampires consider them slaves, possessions. The bond creates a power imbalance that's easily exploited. I won't do that to you. Even if it means I can help you? Even if it means I don't have to run away while you face the council alone? Especially then." He turned away from her, and his voice went soft. "You deserve better than this life. Better than me." Zara stood, moving closer to him. "You saved my life. You've been kind to me when you didn't have to be. You gave me access to knowledge most scholars would kill for. Why can't you accept that I might want to help you in return? Because everyone I've ever cared about has died, and I'm tired of mourning." The words came out raw, stripped of his usual control. "You've been in my life for 2 days, and already I find myself worrying about your safety, planning around your schedule, trying to make you smile. In another week, I'd be half in love with you, and in a month, I'd be completely lost. And then you'd age and die, and I'd have another century of grief to endure. I can't do it again. I won't." The confession hung in the air between them, stunning in its honesty. Zara's heart was racing, her mind trying to process the implications of what he'd just said. Dre. A sound from outside made them both freeze, glass breaking, footsteps, many of them. Draven moved with supernatural speed, positioning himself between Zara and the door. His eyes had gone red again, and his fangs extended fully. "They're here, the council's enforcers." He looked at her over his shoulder, and his expression was fierce and protective and utterly inhuman. "Stay behind me. Don't try to help. Just survive." The door exploded inward, and the suite filled with vampires. There were at least a dozen of them this time, all moving with that eerie supernatural grace. But these weren't young enforcers like before. These vampires were old. Zara could see it in their eyes, in the way they moved, in the cold that radiated from them like winter itself. Lord Draven. The speaker was a tall vampire with silver hair and eyes like ice chips. The council demands your presence, immediately. Tell Constantine to make his demands in person instead of sending assassins like a coward. Draven's voice resonated with power that made the walls shake. This is not a request. You violated dozens of council edicts, harbored a human in your dwelling against protocol, and refused 3 formal summons. You will come with us, or we will drag you in chains. Try it. What happened next was too fast for Zara's human eyes to fully track. Draven moved like lightning, meeting the first attackers with brutal efficiency. But there were too many of them, and even his ancient power couldn't hold against their numbers. She watched in horror as they overwhelmed him, supernatural strength against supernatural strength. He fought magnificently, taking down 3, 4, 5 of them. But eventually, they pinned him, silver chains materializing from nowhere to wrap around his wrists and throat. The chains burned where they touched him, sizzling against his pale skin. He snarled in pain and rage, thrashing against his captors. "Stop!" Zara didn't think, just acted. She grabbed one of the heavy candlesticks from the table and swung it at the nearest vampire. "Let him go!" The vampire caught the candlestick mid-swing, not even bothering to look at her. "Silence, human. This doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't. He's under my protection according to your own law's sanctuary bond, right? If you take him, you break that bond, which means the council is violating the Codex Noctis." Every vampire in the room went absolutely still. Even Draven stopped struggling, staring at her in shock. The leader released Draven's chains and turned to face Zara fully. "You've read the Codex? Cover to cover. And unless I'm misunderstanding ancient vampire law, sanctuary bonds go both ways. Draven is as bound to protect me as I am to offer him shelter. If you remove him by force, you dissolve that bond, which is explicitly forbidden under Article 12, Section 7. Punishment for violation is execution of all parties involved." She was bluffing. She'd only read about half the book, but she said it with enough confidence that the vampires exchanged uncertain looks. "The human has a point," one of them muttered. "If we break the bond, silence." The leader's eyes narrowed at Zara. "You're clever, little mortal, but sanctuary bonds only apply within the dwelling. Once Lord Draven leaves this suite, the bond dissolves naturally." "Does it, though? Because the section I read said the bond persists until the guest willingly departs or the host releases them. Draven hasn't released me, and I'm not leaving voluntarily, which means you'd have to forcibly remove him from a dwelling where he still has an active sanctuary obligation." The leader looked genuinely furious now. "You would twist our laws to protect him?" "I would use your laws exactly as written to protect someone who deserves protection. If that's twisting them, maybe your laws need better writing." Draven made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Zara, stop. You're going to get yourself killed. Better than watching them drag you away in chains." She met his eyes, and something passed between them, understanding, respect, something deeper she wasn't ready to name. "Besides, you said I was stubborn. This is what stubborn looks like." The lead enforcer pulled out what looked like an ancient phone, speaking in rapid Latin. Zara caught enough words to understand he was consulting with someone higher up the chain of command. After a tense minute, he lowered the phone. "The council has decided to adjust their approach. Lord Draven, you will come willingly to answer the charges against you. The human will be held as surety for your cooperation and released unharmed once the trial concludes." "No." Draven's voice was absolute. "She's not collateral. She's not part of this." "Then you leave us no choice but to—" "I'll go," Zara interrupted, ignoring Draven's sharp denial. "But I want it in writing, no, in blood. A formal contract that I'll be released unharmed regardless of how this trial ends. And I want Draven to have a fair hearing in front of the full council, not some kangaroo court." The enforcer looked at her like she was insane. "You have no authority to demand anything, human. I have sanctuary bond, which means harming me harms Draven standing under the Codex. Do you really want to give him grounds for claiming the council violated its own laws? Because that sounds like a great way to start the civil war everyone keeps talking about." Another hurried phone consultation, more rapid Latin. Then, reluctantly, agreed. The human will be guaranteed safe conduct. Lord Draven will receive a formal trial, but both of you come now or the deal is void. Draven looked at Zara with something close to desperation. You don't have to do this. Take the escape route I arranged. Live your life. Forget about vampire politics and doomed kings. Not happening. She moved closer to him, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his skin. You said everyone you cared about died. Well, I'm not planning to die. I'm surprisingly hard to kill. So stop trying to be noble and let me help you. Why? The word came out broken. Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know? Because in 2 days, you've shown me more respect and kindness than most people manage in years. Because you protected me without hesitation. Because you trusted me with your world's greatest secrets. And because, she took a breath, because I think I'm starting to care about you too. And I don't abandon people I care about. His silver eyes went wide, and for a moment he looked young, vulnerable, completely human. Then the enforcers were pulling him to his feet, the silver chains still smoking against his skin. We leave now, the leader said. Both of you. And human. If you try anything clever during transport, the deal is void and we kill you both. Zara nodded, her heart racing. She'd just committed to entering the heart of vampire territory, to facing an ancient council that wanted Draven dead, to placing herself at the mercy of beings who viewed humans as prey. But as they were herded out of the suite, she caught Draven's eye. He looked at her with such profound gratitude and terror, and something else, something warm and fierce, that she knew she'd made the right choice. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. The transport was a convoy of black vehicles with tinted windows, the kind that screamed criminal organization to anyone paying attention. Zara and Draven were placed in separate cars, but she could see him in the vehicle ahead, still bound in those silver chains that made her stomach turn. They drove for hours through the Romanian countryside, eventually turning onto private roads that led deep into forested mountains. As they climbed higher, Zara noticed the trees growing denser, the sunlight fading even though it was only late afternoon. Some kind of supernatural darkness clung to this place. Finally, they arrived at their destination, and Zara's breath caught. A castle rose from the mountainside, like something from a nightmare. It was massive, ancient, all Gothic spires and dark stone. But unlike the romantic ruins tourists visited, this castle was clearly inhabited and maintained. Lights glowed in windows, vampire guards stood at attention, and above it all, storm clouds gathered despite the clear sky elsewhere. Welcome to Castellul Umbra, the lead enforcer said as they were pulled from the vehicles. The Shadow Castle, seat of the Vampire Council. Humans who enter here rarely leave alive. Cheerful place, Zara muttered, but her voice shook. They were marched through enormous doors into an entrance hall that looked medieval and modern simultaneously. Ancient tapestries hung beside security monitors. Torches burned in iron brackets next to electric lighting. The effect was disorienting, a collision of centuries. Draven was taken one direction while Zara was escorted another. She tried to protest, but the vampires simply ignored her, their cold hands gripping her arms hard enough to bruise. They took her to a surprisingly nice room, more guest chamber than dungeon cell. It had a 4-poster bed, antique furniture, even a window with a view of the mountains. But the door locked from the outside, and she had no doubt there were guards stationed nearby. A vampire woman entered a few minutes later carrying clothes. She was striking, with the signature pale skin and white hair, but her eyes were gentler than the others Zara had met. I'm Seraphine, she said, her accent making the name sound like music. I've been assigned to assist you during your stay. Lord Draven requested someone ensure your comfort. When did he request that? They've had him in chains since we got here. Lord Draven has many friends in this castle, even among those who serve the council. He sent word ahead. Seraphine set down the clothes, a dress in deep blue that looked both medieval and elegant. The trial begins in 2 hours. You'll be required to attend as witness. This seemed more appropriate than your travel clothes. Zara looked at the dress skeptically. I don't usually do formal gowns. You're about to appear before the most powerful vampires in existence. Trust me. Formality helps. Seraphine's expression turned serious. I'm going to give you advice that could get me executed if anyone knew I'd shared it. Will you listen? Yes. The council is divided on Draven's fate. Some want him dead because he threatens their power. Others respect his strength and would prefer to bring him back under control. The deciding vote will likely come from Constantine himself, the council leader. He's ancient, cruel, and entirely unpredictable. How do I help Draven? You can't, not directly. But you can influence how the council perceives him. If they see him as a rogue who's lost control, they'll execute him. If they see him as a king still worthy of respect, who's simply been distracted, they might show mercy. Distracted by what? Seraphine looked at Zara like she was being deliberately dense. By you, obviously. Vampires understand obsession. It's one of our defining traits. If Draven's recent behavior can be explained by fixation on a human, the council will view it as a temporary madness rather than permanent rebellion. So I should make them think he's obsessed with me? How does that help? Won't they just kill me to remove the distraction? Not if you invoke the ancient laws. There are precedents, vampires who took human consorts, who formed bonds that even the council couldn't break. It's rare, often tragic, but it's legal. If you claim that bond with Draven, they can't simply kill you without violating the codex. Zara's head spun. You want me to claim I'm his, what, girlfriend, lover, in front of the vampire government? I want you to claim you're his chosen, his companion, the human he's decided to protect above all others. It's not quite the same as a familiar bond, but it's close, and it might be enough to save both your lives. Does Draven know about this plan? No, and he'd probably forbid it if he did. He's too noble for his own good. Seraphine moved to the door, then paused. The trial starts in 2 hours. Use that time to prepare. And Miss Fleming? Don't underestimate how dangerous the council is. They've survived for millennia by being ruthless. If you show weakness, they'll exploit it. Be strong, be confident, and most importantly, be convincing when you tell them that Draven is yours. Then she was gone, leaving Zara alone with a formal dress and an impossible task. She spent the next 2 hours pacing, practicing what she might say, and trying not to panic. The dress fit perfectly. Seraphine had good judgment about measurements, and when Zara looked at herself in the antique mirror, she barely recognized her own reflection. She looked like she belonged in this vampire world, all dark fabric and serious expression. When they came for her, she was as ready as she'd ever be. The throne room was exactly as terrifying as Zara expected. It was vast, lit by hundreds of candles that cast dancing shadows on stone walls covered in ancient weapons and battle standards. And seated on raised thrones at the far end were the council members. There were 7 of them, each looking more ancient and powerful than the last. Their eyes glowed in the candlelight silver, red, gold, and their presence was suffocating. Zara felt like prey standing before apex predators. In the center throne sat Constantine, and he was nightmare-made flesh. He looked young, maybe 40, but his eyes held millennia. His white hair fell past his waist, and he wore black robes that seemed to absorb light. When he smiled, his fangs were prominent and sharp as razors. "The human who dares invoke sanctuary law," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "How amusing. Come forward, little mortal. Let us see what has captured Lord Draven's legendary attention." Zara walked forward, forcing herself not to show fear. Guards lined both sides of the room, and in the center, still bound in silver chains, was Draven. He looked at her with desperate warning in his eyes. "State your name," Constantine commanded. "Zara Fleming, anthropologist. I was sharing accommodation with Lord Draven when your enforcers attacked." Sharing accommodation. What a delicate way to describe it. Constantine's smile widened. "Tell me, Miss Fleming, what is your relationship with the accused?" This was it. The moment Seraphine had prepared her for. Zara took a breath and committed. "Lord Draven is my chosen protector and companion. I have placed myself under his care according to the ancient laws. Any action against him is an action against me." The council erupted in whispers. Draven made a sound of protest, but the silver chains tightened, silencing him. Constantine held up one pale hand for silence. "Interesting. Lord Draven, did you accept this arrangement?" "No." Draven's voice was hoarse. "She's confused. The sanctuary bond is not the same as I accepted her into my dwelling, offered her protection, and defended her life against threats. According to the Codex, that constitutes acceptance of companionship bond." It was a stretch of the law. Zara had read that section, but she said it with absolute confidence. Another council member leaned forward. She had golden eyes and looked vaguely amused. The human has studied our laws. How educational. But companionship requires more than simple protection, little mortal. It requires devotion, obsession, the kind of bond that makes a vampire value a human life above their own kind. Do you truly claim Lord Draven feels that way about you? I claim he's proven it through his actions. He fought council enforcers to protect me. He's risked everything to keep me safe. And he offered me knowledge of your world despite knowing it put both of us in danger. Zara met the golden eyes steadily. If that's not devotion, what is? Words, Constantine said dismissively. Any vampire can pretend to care about a human. We're excellent liars. What proof do you offer that this bond is real? Zara's mind raced. What proof? How could she prove something that had barely existed for days? Then she remembered Draven's confession in the suite, his raw honesty, his admission that he was already half in love with her. Ask him, she said simply. Ask Lord Draven under oath whether he values my life. Your laws require truth in council chambers, don't they? He can't lie here. Constantine's eyes gleamed with interest. How clever. Very well. He turned to Draven. Lord Draven Noctis Alvarez, you stand in the circle of truth. Answer honestly or face immediate execution. Do you value this human's life? The silver chains glowed, enforcing the compulsion. Draven's jaw clenched and he fought against it, but the ancient magic was too strong. Yes, he finally ground out. How much do you value it? More than my own. The words came out like they were being torn from him. More than my position, more than my pride. I would burn this council to ashes before I let you harm her. Absolute silence fell over the throne room. Even Constantine looked surprised. Well, he said finally, that's certainly emphatic. It seems the great Lord Draven has finally found something he cares about. His expression turned calculating, which makes this situation much more interesting. You see, Miss Fleming, the council was prepared to execute Lord Draven for his repeated insolence. But now you've given us leverage. Zara's blood went cold. What do you mean? Your life for his cooperation. He'll submit to council authority, accept proper oversight, and cease his rebellious activities, or we'll kill you in front of him and make him watch. A simple exchange. No. Draven's voice was barely human now, resonating with rage. I'll submit to anything you want. Just let her go. Please. Constantine smiled like a cat with cream. There it is, the proud vampire king, begging. How delightful. He looked at Zara. What do you think, little mortal? Should we accept his surrender? Zara's mind was working frantically. This was wrong, she could feel it. If Draven submitted now, he'd be under the council's control forever. They'd use her as a permanent threat, a leash to control him, and eventually, when she aged and died naturally, they'd have spent decades breaking his spirit. No, she said. Everyone stared at her. No, Constantine repeated. You refuse to save your chosen's life? I refuse to let you use me as a weapon against him. The Codex has provisions for trials by blood, right? Single combat to determine council disputes? She was making this up as she went, half remembering fragments from the text. I invoke that right on Draven's behalf. You can't invoke trial by blood. You're human. But my chosen can, and as his bonded companion, I can speak for him in legal matters. She had no idea if that was true, but she said it like it was fact. Draven fights for his freedom. Winner takes all. The council exploded into argument. Vampires were shouting in multiple languages, some objecting, some supporting, all seeming surprised by the audacity of a human invoking their most ancient laws. Constantine held up his hand again. When silence fell, he was actually smiling. This human amuses me. Very well. Trial by blood is granted. Lord Draven will face a council champion. If he wins, all charges are dropped, and he returns to his territory with full autonomy. If he loses, the smile widened. We execute you both? Agreed? No, Draven said desperately. Zara, please. Agreed, Zara said firmly. But I have one condition. The fight has to be fair. No silver chains, no council interference, just honest combat. Acceptable. Constantine gestured, and the silver chains around Draven fell away. He gasped in relief as the burns started healing immediately. The trial will take place at dawn tomorrow. That gives our champion time to prepare and gives you time to reconsider this foolish decision, Miss Fleming. Guards moved forward to escort them out. As they passed, Constantine's voice followed them. "Oh, and Lord Draven? My champion will be your old friend Victor. I believe you two have history." Draven went completely rigid, and Zara knew without asking that this was bad news. They were taken to different chambers, Zara to her previous room, Draven somewhere deeper in the castle. Seraphine appeared again as soon as the guards left. "That was either brilliant or suicidal," she said. "Victor is the council's executioner. He's killed more vampires than plague. Draven can't possibly defeat him. Then we need to figure out how to help him." Zara paced the room, thinking. "You said Draven has friends here. Can any of them get me to him? I need to talk to him before the trial." Seraphine looked uncertain, then nodded. "It's risky. If we're caught, then we'll deal with that. Please. I didn't come this far to let politics and pride get him killed." 2 hours later, Seraphine led Zara through secret passages in the castle walls, narrow corridors that smelled of dust and time. They emerged in what looked like a dungeon, though the cell was more like a fortified room. Draven sat on the edge of a stone bed, his head in his hands. When he looked up and saw Zara, his expression cycled through relief, anger, and despair. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Yeah, well, I'm stubborn. We've established this." She moved closer and Seraphine discreetly retreated to stand guard. "Tell me about Victor." "He was my second in command once, my best friend for nearly 2 centuries. We fought together, built my territory together, survived the last council war together." Draven's voice was hollow. "Then the council offered him power and position if he'd betray me. He took the deal. He's been their champion ever since." "Can you beat him? In a fair fight?" "Maybe. But Victor doesn't fight fair. He knows every one of my moves, every weakness. He trained me, Zara. He knows me better than I know myself. Then we'll have to change the rules." Zara sat beside him on the bed, close enough to feel the cold radiating from his skin. "Tell me everything about vampire combat. How it works, what's allowed, what's forbidden." "Why?" "Because I'm an anthropologist. I study cultures, find patterns, identify weaknesses. Your vampire world has rules, rules that have been in place for centuries, and old rules always have exploits if you know where to look." He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened. "You're remarkable. You know that? I've been told I'm stubborn and reckless. Remarkable is new. You're all 3, and you're going to get yourself killed trying to save me. Not if you help me understand how to beat Victor." She took his cold hand in hers, ignoring how the touch made her shiver. "Talk to me, Dre. Tell me about vampire trials. There has to be something we can use." So he talked. He explained the rules of blood combat: no weapons, no outside interference, fight to submission or death. He described Victor's fighting style, his preference for overwhelming strength over finesse, and slowly, as they talked, an idea began forming in Zara's mind. "The trial is at dawn," she said slowly. "Why dawn specifically?" "It's traditional. The moment between night and day when vampire power is weakest. It's meant to prove the fighter's true strength." "But you're older than Victor, right? More powerful?" "Yes, but..." "So at dawn, when both of you are weakened, your age advantage becomes even more significant. Victor's power drops more than yours does." She was thinking out loud now, piecing it together. "And he knows that, so he'll try to end the fight quickly, use his strength before the sun rises fully. But if you can survive the first few minutes, drag the fight out." Draven's eyes widened. "My power would outlast his. He'd weaken faster than me." He stood suddenly, pacing. "It could work. If I fight defensively at first, weather his initial assault, I might be able to turn it around once the sun rises higher." "Will the council allow that? Defensive fighting?" "The rules only require that both parties fight seriously. How we fight is up to us." He turned to face her, and his expression was intense. "Zara, if this works, if I actually survive this—" "When you survive this," she corrected. "When I survive this, I'm taking you somewhere far from the council, somewhere safe, and I'm going to spend as much time as you'll allow getting to know you properly, without vampire politics and death threats." Zara smiled despite the situation. "That sounds like a date." "It's a promise." He moved closer, and suddenly the space between them felt charged. "I meant what I said in the throne room, every word. I value your life more than my own. These past few days with you have been unexpected, wonderful, terrifying." "Same," Zara whispered. "I came to Romania to present research, and instead, I found a vampire king who insults me, protects me, and makes me feel like I matter for the first time in years. You do matter. You matter more than you could possibly understand." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his cold hands. His silver eyes searched hers, asking permission for something neither of them had dared name yet. Zara answered by closing the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was cold fire. His mouth was ice against hers, but the way he kissed her was passionate, desperate, centuries of loneliness poured into a single moment of connection. Zara's hands found his white hair, tangling in the silken strands, and he pulled her closer with supernatural gentleness, like she was something precious and fragile. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "That was," Draven started. "Worth the wait?" Zara finished, grinning. "Worth 800 years of waiting." He pressed his forehead to hers, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "If I survive tomorrow, Zara Fleming, I'm going to court you properly. Flowers and moonlight walks and all the romantic nonsense humans seem to enjoy. And then, if you'll have me, I'm going to ask you to stay, to bond with me, formally, to become part of my world permanently." "You're talking about the familiar bond, the one you said you'd never force on me." "I'm not forcing anything. I'm asking. Someday, when all this is over and you've had time to think clearly without death threats looming." He kissed her forehead gently. "But know that whatever you decide, I'm yours. Vampire king or not, council approval or not, I'm choosing you." Zara felt tears burning in her eyes. "You better survive tomorrow, because I'm going to want to hear that offer again when we're not in a dungeon. Then I'll survive." He said it like a vow. "I've fought for centuries for pride and power and politics. Tomorrow I fight for something that actually matters. I fight for you." Seraphine appeared in the doorway looking nervous. "Guards are changing shifts. We need to go now." Zara kissed Draven one more time, quick and fierce, then let Seraphine lead her back through the secret passages. As they walked, her mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow's trial, to all the things that could go wrong, to the vampire champion who wanted Draven dead. But underneath the fear was something stronger, hope and determination. They'd come this far together, a human and a vampire, an anthropologist and a king. She wasn't going to let some council executioner end their story before it really began. Dawn came too quickly. Zara was escorted to the castle's inner courtyard as the sky began to lighten. The space was enormous, surrounded by high stone walls. The council sat in raised boxes like this was some kind of gladiatorial arena. Other vampires, nobles, and courtiers filled additional seating, all of them looking pale and predatory in the pre-dawn light. Draven entered from one side of the courtyard, and Zara's heart clenched. He'd changed into fighting clothes, simple black that allowed freedom of movement. His white hair was pulled back, and his expression was focused, calm, deadly. Victor entered from the opposite side, and Zara understood immediately why Draven was worried. Victor was massive, built like a warrior, with scars visible even on his pale skin. His white hair was cropped short, and his eyes were pure red, no silver at all. He looked at Draven with something like regret mixed with anticipation. "Old friend," Victor's voice carried across the courtyard, "it didn't have to be this way." "You made your choice 200 years ago," Draven replied coldly. "Live with it." Constantine stood in his box and silence fell. Trial by blood, combat to submission or death. Both parties have agreed to the terms. The fight begins when the first ray of sunlight touches the courtyard wall. It ends when one party yields or dies. Are both champions ready? "Ready," Victor said. "Ready," Draven echoed. Everyone watched the sky. Zara found herself holding her breath, her hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. The moment seemed to stretch forever. Then a single ray of golden light broke over the castle wall, touching the stone. Victor moved. He was impossibly fast, crossing the courtyard in a blur. Draven barely dodged the first strike, supernatural reflexes saving him from a blow that cracked the stone where he'd been standing. They exchanged attacks too quick for Zara to follow, moving like deadly dancers. But Victor was stronger. Each hit he landed drove Draven back, and blood started appearing on Draven's pale skin where claws had struck. The crowd of vampires began murmuring, and Zara heard bets being placed on how long Draven would last. He's losing, she thought desperately. Victor's too strong. Then she remembered their plan. Draven wasn't trying to win yet. He was defending, evading, letting Victor exhaust himself. As more sunlight flooded the courtyard, she saw Victor beginning to slow. Not much, barely noticeable, but Draven was slowing less. Draven changed tactics. He stopped retreating and started pressing forward, matching Victor's aggression. The tide of battle shifted. Now it was Victor who was forced to defend, and his movements were getting sluggish as the sun rose higher. The crowd's murmurs changed from dismissive to uncertain. The council members leaned forward in their boxes, watching intently. Victor seemed to realize what was happening. He roared in frustration and launched a desperate assault, trading defense for overwhelming offense. He landed several brutal hits, and Draven went down hard. Zara was on her feet before she realized she'd moved. A scream caught in her throat, but Draven rolled aside as Victor's finishing blow cratered the ground. Then, with precision born of 8 centuries of combat experience, Draven struck back. He caught Victor's extended arm, used his momentum against him, and threw him into the courtyard wall hard enough to crack stone. Victor struggled to rise, but the sun was fully up now. His red eyes were dimming, his movements slow and pained. Draven approached him, looking battered but standing. "Yield," Draven said quietly. "Victor, please. For the friendship we once had. Yield." Victor looked at him with something like sorrow. "You know I can't. The council would kill me for losing. Then I'll make it quick. I'm sorry, old friend." "So am I." Draven's strike was precise and merciful. Victor stopped moving. The courtyard exploded into chaos. Some vampires cheered, others looked furious, still others seemed shocked. The council members were conferring urgently among themselves. Constantine stood, and silence fell instantly. He looked at Draven with an unreadable expression. "Lord Draven Noctis Alvarez has won trial by blood. According to our laws, all charges are dismissed. His autonomy is restored." Constantine's voice was flat, giving nothing away. "He's free to leave with his companion." Draven swayed on his feet, exhaustion and injuries catching up to him, but he kept his voice steady. "I thank the council for their justice." "Don't thank us yet." Constantine's smile was sharp. "You've won your freedom, but you've also made enemies today. Watch your back, Lord Draven. The night is long, and memory is longer still." It was simultaneously a dismissal and a threat. Guards moved forward to escort them out. Zara rushed to Draven's side, supporting him as his legs nearly buckled. "I've got you. Come on." They were taken back to the Crimson Suite. Apparently having their belongings returned was part of the deal. Seraphine appeared with medical supplies, though vampire healing was already closing Draven's wounds. "That was incredible," Seraphine said, helping Draven to a chair. "I've never seen anyone use sun weakness as a tactical advantage like that." The council members are still arguing about whether it violated the spirit of the rules. "Did it?" Zara asked. "Who cares? You won." Seraphine grinned. "Though I'd recommend leaving Romanian territory as quickly as possible. Constantine doesn't like being outsmarted, and Victor had friends." "Noted," Draven said tiredly. He looked at Zara. "Thank you. Your strategy saved my life. We saved each other. That's how this works." She sat beside him, taking his cold hand. "So what now?" "Now we leave. I have holdings in Scotland, a castle that's been in my possession for 5 centuries. It's remote, well defended, and the local vampire clans owe me loyalty. We'll be safe there while we figure out our next move." "We?" Zara repeated. "You want me to come with you?" "If you're willing." "I meant what I said, Zara. I want you in my life, for as long as you'll have me." His silver eyes met hers seriously. "I know it's fast. I know you have a life in America, research and career, and probably people who'll worry if you disappear. But I'm asking anyway. Come with me. Let me show you my world properly, without the threat of death hanging over us, and then you can decide if this us is something you want permanently." Zara thought about her life back home. Her tiny apartment, her adjunct teaching position that barely paid rent, her research that no one seemed to value. Then she thought about the past few days, the excitement, the danger, the feeling of actually mattering to someone, the kiss in the dungeon, the way Draven looked at her like she was something precious. "I need to make some calls," she said finally. Arrange a leave of absence. Let my parents know I'm not dead. But yes, I want to come with you." His smile was brilliant, transforming his pale face into something warm and alive. "Then we leave tonight. Pack whatever you need. Everything else I'll provide." They departed Castle Umbra as soon as darkness fell, traveling in a private car with tinted windows. Draven slept most of the journey, recovering from the trial, and Zara watched the Romanian countryside roll past and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. By the time they reached Draven's Scottish castle 3 days later, traveling only at night, staying in vampire-friendly establishments during the day, Zara had started to understand the scope of his world. He owned properties across Europe, had contacts in every major city, and commanded respect even from vampires who didn't agree with his politics. He was truly a king, even without a formal crown. The Scottish castle was breathtaking. It sat on a cliff overlooking the North Sea, all dark stone and Gothic architecture. But inside, it had been modernized with care electricity, internet, comfortable furniture that blended old and new. It felt like a home rather than a fortress. "Welcome to Thorn Castle," Draven said as they entered. "It's yours as much as mine now." A small staff greeted them, half human, half vampire, all loyal to Draven. Zara was given a suite of rooms that connected to Draven's chambers, beautiful spaces with views of the sea and more books than some libraries. Over the next few weeks, Zara settled into a routine that felt surreal. She spent days researching. Draven had given her access to his private library, which contained texts on vampire history that scholars would kill for. She spent evenings with Draven, learning about his world, sharing stories about her own, building something between them that felt real and right and terrifying in its intensity. He courted her like he'd promised. They walked the castle grounds at night, watching stars over the sea. He brought her flowers that only bloomed in darkness. He introduced her to vampire culture slowly, carefully, making sure she understood what she was choosing. And slowly, carefully, Zara fell completely in love with a vampire king. One night, about a month after they'd arrived, Draven found her in the library. She was translating an ancient text about vampire-human bonds, making notes for research she'd never be able to publish, but couldn't stop herself from doing anyway. "Researching again?" he asked, settling into the chair beside hers. "You know you could just ask me your questions directly." "Where's the fun in that?" But she set down her pen and turned to face him. "Actually, I do have questions about the familiar bond." His expression grew serious. "Zara." "I've been thinking about it, about what it would mean. Extended lifespan, connection to you, becoming part of vampire society." She took a breath. "And I think I want it, if the offer still stands." He went completely still. "You're sure?" "I'm sure I want to be with you. I'm sure I've never felt this way about anyone. I'm sure that going back to my old life would feel like dying after everything I've experienced here." She reached for his hand. "I'm not saying it's not scary. It is, but you're worth being scared for. The bond is permanent, Zara. Once formed, it can only be broken by death. You'd be tied to me for centuries, possibly millennia. You'd age slowly, live by night, exist between the human and vampire worlds. Are you really ready for that?" "I'm ready to try. With you." She smiled. "Besides, someone needs to keep you from picking fights with ancient vampire councils. May as well be me." He laughed, the sound warm and real. Then he sobered, his expression becoming reverent. "Then I offer you the bond formally, Zara Fleming. My blood for yours, my life for yours, my immortality shared, my protection absolute, my devotion eternal. Will you accept?" "Yes," the word came out certain, strong. "I accept." The ritual was simple but profound. Draven cut his wrist and Zara drank his blood cold and strange and powerful. Then he drank from her throat, gentle despite his fangs. Magic surged between them, ancient and binding, and Zara felt something fundamental shift inside her. When it was done, she felt different, stronger, more aware. And connected to Draven in a way that went beyond words, she could sense his emotions, his presence, like a constant warmth in her mind. "How do you feel?" he asked, watching her carefully. "Different, good, like I can feel you inside my head." "That's the bond. It'll grow stronger over time." He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. "You're mine now, truly. And I'm yours." "Good," Zara whispered, "because I'm not planning on letting you go." They stayed like that for a long moment, just holding each other, feeling the bond settle into place. Then Draven pulled back slightly, his expression turning playful. "So, now that you're my bonded familiar, there are traditions we should observe." "What kind of traditions?" "The kind that involve me spending the next several hours showing you exactly how much I adore you." He scooped her up easily, supernatural strength making it effortless. "If you're amenable," Zara laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Very amenable." He carried her to his chambers, and they spent the night learning each other properly, the bond between them making every touch more intense, every kiss deeper. By the time dawn forced Draven to rest, Zara was thoroughly loved and completely certain she'd made the right choice. The months that followed were the happiest of Zara's life. She adapted to vampire hours, sleeping during the day and waking at sunset. She continued her research, now with access to vampire scholars who were fascinated by her outsider perspective on their culture. And she stood at Draven's side as he navigated vampire politics, offering insights from her anthropological background that helped him avoid several conflicts. The council kept their distance, though Constantine sent occasional messages that were equal parts threat and grudging respect. Draven's status as independent king was secure for now, especially with other younger vampires starting to follow his example of questioning old hierarchies. Zara's parents were confused but supportive when she explained she was taking an extended research sabbatical in Europe with a significant other. She visited them twice a year, always careful about the timing, and they seemed to accept that their daughter had finally found something that made her happy. One night, almost a year after the trial, Draven took Zara to the castle's highest tower. The view was spectacular: stars overhead, sea below, the world spread out in darkness and beauty. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small box. Inside was a ring, not an engagement ring, something older, stranger. The metal was black and seemed to absorb light, and the stone was deep red like blood. "It's a daylight ring," Draven explained, "extremely rare. It'll let me walk in sunlight without burning, as long as I'm touching you. The bond between us powers it." Zara stared at the ring in shock. "You're giving me the ability to take you into daytime. I'm giving us the freedom to experience the world together, properly, completely." He slipped the ring onto her finger. "I've lived 8 centuries in darkness. I'd like to see a sunrise with you, if you'll have me." "Always," Zara said, tears streaming down her face. "Every sunrise, every sunset, every moment in between." They waited together for dawn, standing on the tower as the sky began to lighten. As the first rays of sun broke over the horizon, Draven took her hand. The ring glowed softly. And for the first time in 800 years, the vampire king stood in full sunlight without pain. He turned his face toward the light, eyes closed, expression full of wonder. Zara watched him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me this, for giving me everything." "Thank you for asking me to stay," she replied, "for making me feel like I belonged somewhere, for loving me." "Always," he echoed, pulling her close, "for as long as you'll have me." "Then forever," Zara said simply. They stood together in the sunlight, a human and a vampire, bound by love and magic and choice. Behind them lay centuries of darkness and loneliness. Before them stretched an immortal future filled with possibility. The hotel had double-booked their suite, bringing them together by accident. But what grew between them was no accident at all. It was choice, courage, and a love strong enough to bridge the gap between mortal and immortal worlds. And as they watched the sun rise over the Scottish Highlands, Zara knew with perfect certainty that she'd made the right choice. She'd found her home, her partner, her forever. She'd found her vampire king. Years passed, then decades. Zara aged slowly, gracefully, the familiar bond extending her lifespan far beyond human norms. She became a recognized scholar in vampire society, writing histories that preserved both vampire and human perspectives. Draven continued his work as king, with Zara's advice helping him navigate the changing world. The council eventually fractured, with younger vampires following Draven's example of adaptation and evolution. Constantine disappeared into obscurity, his power diminished by changing times. A new vampire society began emerging, one that acknowledged humans as partners rather than prey, that sought coexistence rather than domination. And through it all, Draven and Zara remained together. Not without challenges. Immortality had its complications, and vampire politics never entirely ceased. But they faced everything as a team, bound by magic and love and the choice they'd made in a Romanian hotel suite a lifetime ago. Thorncastle became something new under their care, not just a vampire stronghold, but a haven for those who didn't fit traditional categories, humans who loved vampires, vampires who questioned old ways, scholars and rebels and romantics who believed a better world was possible. On their 50th anniversary, Draven took Zara back to Romania. The hotel still stood, though under new management. They booked the Crimson Suite, no double booking this time, and spent the night reminiscing about how they'd met. "If I could go back," Draven said, holding her close as they stood by the window, "I wouldn't change a thing. Not the fight, not the danger, not the moment you walked into my life and turned everything upside down. Not even the part where I argued with you," Zara teased. "Especially that part. You weren't afraid of me. You treated me like a person, not a monster or a title. You saw me." He kissed her gently. "You gave me back my humanity, Zara, and I'll spend eternity grateful for it. You gave me adventure and purpose and love beyond anything I dreamed possible. I think we're even." They stood together in the suite where their story began, watching the modern world pass by outside. So much had changed since that storm-tossed night when a booking error brought them together. But some things remained constant, the bond between them, the love they'd built, the future they'd chosen. "Ready to go home?" Draven asked eventually. "Always," Zara replied. They left the Crimson Suite hand in hand, two souls bound across the gap between mortal and immortal, human and vampire, temporary and eternal. The hotel had double-booked their suite and changed both their lives forever, and neither of them would have had it any other way. Their story became legend in vampire society, the tale of the vampire king who fell in love with a human scholar, who fought the council for her safety, who chose her over power and pride. Young vampires told it to each other as proof that love could exist even in their dark world. Humans who learned the truth told it as hope that vampires could be more than monsters. But for Draven and Zara, it was simply their life, their choice, their happily ever after, earned through courage and stubbornness and a willingness to see beyond old prejudices to the person underneath. They lived for centuries more, watching the world change around them. They saw humanity reach the stars. They saw vampire society transform from secret predators to something more complex and nuanced. They saw old hatreds fade and new understandings emerge. And through it all, they loved each other with the intensity of that first kiss in a Romanian dungeon, with the certainty of the bond they'd chosen, with the joy of two souls who'd found each other against impossible odds. The hotel had double-booked their suite. The vampire king had insisted she take the bed. And from that simple beginning grew a love that lasted forever, proving that sometimes the best stories start with a mistake, a storm, and two people willing to see beyond what they thought they knew to discover what could be. In the end, that's what love always is, a choice to see truly, to trust deeply, to hold on fiercely even when the world says it's impossible. Draven and Zara chose each other, and that choice echoed through centuries, changing not just their lives but the entire world around them. And every year, on the anniversary of their meeting, they returned to that hotel suite. They stood together by the window, watching whatever weather the night brought, remembering the storm that began everything. "Thank you," Draven would whisper, "for staying, for choosing me." "Thank you," Zara would reply, "for insisting I take the bed, for protecting me, for loving me." And then they would kiss, two eternal souls bound by love and magic and choice, grateful for the double booking that brought them together and for every moment since. Their story had no ending because love like theirs doesn't end. It simply continues, growing deeper and stronger with each passing year, each shared sunrise, each moment of choosing each other all over again. The hotel double-booked their suite. The vampire king insisted she take the bed. And from that simple act of chivalry grew a love that proved immortality is real, not in the blood that sustains vampires, but in the bonds that connect souls across any divide. They lived happily ever after. Not perfectly, no life is perfect, but together, which was all that ever mattered. And somewhere in a castle overlooking the Scottish Sea, they continue living that happiness still. Two souls united across impossible boundaries, proof that love can bridge any gap if you're brave enough to try. The end of their beginning, the beginning of forever.